This isn't just a family drama. It's a battle written into contracts. For years, we've watched the slow, heartbreaking dissolution of the Roloff family dream, centered around one sprawling, iconic piece of land in Helvetia, Oregon. We've seen the arguments, the tears, the tense negotiations. We've been led to believe it was all about emotion, about price, about two ex-spouses who simply couldn't see eye to eye on the value of their shared history. But what if that's just the story they wanted us to see? What if the real story, the one that truly explains why Amy Roloff is no longer a landowner on Roloff Farms, was signed, sealed, and delivered in secret years before the final sale? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most compelling and under-the-radar theories in the Little People, Big World universe, the theory of the secret contract. We're piecing together insider reports, exclusive theories, and a careful re-examination of the evidence to ask the ultimate question. Did Matt Roloff use a hidden clause in their divorce settlement to legally lock Amy out of the farm for good, long before she ever made her final decision to sell? Before we pull back the curtain on this explosive theory, if you're a fan of Little People, Big World, and you crave the deep dives and exclusive analysis that you won't find anywhere else, then you've found your home. Hit that subscribe button for LPBW update right now. Click the bell to be notified of all our new investigations, and give this video a thumbs up to let us know you're ready for the truth. Your support helps us dig deeper. Now, let's get to it. To understand the sheer magnitude of this theory, we must first travel back in time, not just to the sale, but to the divorce itself. This is our witness stand, and the primary witness is Amy Roloff. Through her own words, both on the show and in her revealing memoir, A Little Me, she paints a picture not of a simple business negotiation, but of a confusing, high-pressure, and emotionally fraught legal process. For years on the show, viewers watched Amy agonize over the decision to sell her half of the farm to Matt. It was presented as a years-long period of indecision. Was she ready to leave her home of 30 years? Could she part with the house she raised her 4 children in? What was a fair price? This narrative, carefully curated for the cameras, positioned Amy as emotionally paralyzed, unable to move on, while Matt was the pragmatic businessman, frustrated by her indecisiveness, but patiently waiting. But the secret contract theory suggests this was a complete misdirection. It posits that Amy's perceived indecision wasn't about whether to sell, but about grappling with the devastating reality that she had already been legally outmaneuvered. Let's examine her behavior through this new lens. Think of the countless scenes where Amy would sit at her kitchen table, poring over documents, her face a mask of confusion and stress. She would often say things like, "I have to read this all again," or "I'm not sure I understand what this all means." The show framed this as a person unfamiliar with complex real estate contracts. But what if it was something more? What if she was rereading a document she had signed years earlier during the divorce, suddenly realizing the full draconian implications of a clause she had overlooked? A clause, sources whisper, that was intentionally buried in hundreds of pages of legalese. Amy herself has spoken about the divorce process being overwhelming. She has claimed in no uncertain terms that Matt and his legal team were far more aggressive and prepared. She recalls stacks of paperwork being presented, timelines being imposed, and a constant pressure to sign and finalize the split. It is in this high-pressure environment that the seed of the secret contract is said to have been planted. An insider report stemming from a source allegedly close to the production team during that era suggests that the divorce settlement contained far more than just the division of assets and custody arrangements. It contained a complex and forward-looking property agreement, specifically concerning the 100-plus acres of Roloff Farms. This wasn't just about splitting it 50-50. This was about defining the future, and according to this theory, it was a future Matt had already mapped out, one where he held all the trump cards. This brings us to the evidence, the core of the entire theory. The alleged property clause, which some have dubbed the legacy lockout clause. This isn't a document we can pull up online. It's the kind of thing that would be sealed in divorce records. But its alleged terms, pieced together from insider whispers and analysis of the family's subsequent actions, are chillingly specific. The clause, as the theory goes, stipulated that upon the divorce's finalization, the farm would be legally partitioned. However, it went a step further. It allegedly contained language that gave Matt the right of first refusal on Amy's portion, which is standard, but it was the subclauses where the trap was supposedly laid. The theory states that if Amy ever chose to sell her portion, she was contractually obligated to sell it to Matt and only to Matt. She could not list it on the open market. She could not sell it to her children. She could not leverage an outside offer to drive up the price. She had one potential buyer, her ex-husband, but it gets worse. The most devastating part of this rumored clause was its effect on valuation. The contract allegedly predetermined the method for appraising the property, a method that heavily favored Matt's view of the farm as a single business entity rather than two separate premium real estate parcels. This means the fair market value Amy was entitled to was based on a formula she had agreed to years prior, under duress and without fully understanding its long-term impact. This would explain the endless arguments over the price. Amy would argue for the emotional value in the current, red-hot Oregon real estate market value. Matt would calmly hold his ground, stating what the agreed-upon number was. We, the viewers, thought it was a classic negotiation. But if the theory is true, it wasn't a negotiation at all. It was Matt simply enforcing a contract Amy had already signed. Her arguments were legally meaningless. She was bound by a number or a formula that had been set in stone years before. This reframes her on-screen frustration completely. It was not the frustration of a tough negotiator. It was the impotent rage of someone realizing they're caught in a legal checkmate. She was a queen on the chessboard with no safe squares left to move. Every path led to her capture. To understand the injustice of this, we must look at the proof of contribution. Amy Roloff was not just a resident on the farm. She was a co-creator and architect of its success. For nearly 3 decades, her labor and her own money were poured into that soil. People often forget that when the Roloffs first purchased the initial parcel of land, it was a fixer-upper. It was a raw piece of property that required immense vision and backbreaking work. Amy was there from day one, raising 4 children in a construction zone, managing a household, and actively participating in the farm's development. When pumpkin season became the central business of Roloff Farms, who was the face of the operation? It was Amy. She was the one greeting families, running the souvenir stand, organizing the logistics of ticket sales, and guest experiences. While Matt was the visionary, building the whimsical structures and dreaming up the next big project, Amy was the operational heart of the farm. She provided the stability and the day-to-day management that turned Matt's dreams into a profitable reality. Furthermore, Amy's own financial contributions are often understated. As the show's popularity soared, each family member became a brand. Amy was a sought-after motivational speaker. She wrote a successful cookbook and penned her own memoir. The income from these ventures, earned through her own name and her own efforts, was family money. It was invested back into the farm, paying for upkeep, funding Matt's latest project, or simply supporting the family's lifestyle. She wasn't just Matt's wife, she was his business partner in every sense of the word. She had as much, if not more, sweat equity and emotional equity in that land as he did. She earned her 50% ownership, not just through marriage, but through decades of tangible, measurable contribution. The idea that this immense contribution could be effectively nullified by a cleverly worded clause hidden in a mountain of divorce paperwork is the crux of the perceived betrayal. It suggests that while Amy was focused on the emotional trauma of ending her marriage, Matt was playing a long game of corporate chess, securing not just his half, but the ultimate control over her half as well. It paints a picture of a ruthless businessman who saw the end of his marriage as a strategic opportunity to consolidate his most prized asset, the Roloff Farm legacy. This leads us to the ruling. In this story, there is no official judge or court to deliver a verdict. The jury box is filled by us, the millions of fans who have invested years of our lives watching this family. And the central question before this jury is this: was Amy Roloff cut out unfairly, or was it ultimately her choice? The narrative presented by the show, and by Matt's camp, is that it was her choice. She was offered a fair price, she had years to decide, and she eventually took the money and left of her own free will. She chose to sell. She chose to move on. In this version of events, any regret she feels now is simply seller's remorse, a natural nostalgia for a home she chose to leave behind. It absolves Matt of any wrongdoing and paints him as a patient businessman who simply bought out his partner. But if you believe the secret contract theory, the word choice becomes a cruel joke. It wasn't a choice, it was the illusion of choice. Imagine being presented with 3 doors. Behind door A, you sell your beloved home and legacy to the one person you're contractually obligated to sell to, at a price predetermined by a formula that undervalues it, a formula you unknowingly agreed to years ago. Behind door B, you refuse to sell and continue to live in a state of perpetual conflict, co-owning a property with your ex-husband and his new partner, with no power to make changes and no ability to ever buy him out because you lack the same contractual leverage. Behind door C, you attempt to fight the contract in court, a costly, public, and emotionally draining battle that would likely tear your family apart even further, with no guarantee of success against a document you legally sign. What kind of a choice is that? It's a choice between bad, worse, and catastrophic. The secret contract theory argues that Amy's decision to sell was nothing more than her picking the least painful of 3 terrible preordained options. It was a forced move, a strategic surrender. She didn't choose to leave the farm. She chose to escape an untenable legal and emotional prison that had been built around her. The fans acting as jury are therefore left to weigh the on-screen narrative against this deeply compelling, albeit alternative. Was she a free agent who made a deal, or was she a signatory to a contract whose true meaning only became clear when it was far too late to escape it? Now, for the critical question, how could something so monumental, so central to the entire farm drama, be kept from the viewers? This is where we get into the theory to prove it real. The idea that TLC cameras, either by choice or by contractual obligation, deliberately avoided showing the crucial legal paperwork. This isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. Reality television is not a documentary. It is a manufactured narrative. Producers and editors shape thousands of hours of footage into a coherent, dramatic storyline. They choose what to show you and, more importantly, what not to show you. Throughout the years of the farm negotiations, we saw countless scenes of paperwork, papers spread across tables, papers being signed, papers being pointed at during heated discussions. But have you ever seen a clear, readable shot of the actual contractual language? No. The camera always stays at a respectful distance, or it focuses on the faces of the people involved, capturing their emotional reactions rather than the legal text causing them. The theory posits several reasons for this deliberate omission. The first and simplest is that legal contracts are boring and complicated. A 10-minute scene explaining the intricacies of a property valuation clause would be a ratings killer. It's much better television to show Amy crying in the kitchen or Matt storming off on his mule. Emotion sells, legalese does not. The second, more conspiratorial reason is that Matt Roloff, as not just a star but also a producer on the show, had significant creative control. It's been widely reported that he is more involved in the production and editing of the show than the average reality star. It is entirely plausible that he would have used this influence to ensure that any contractual details that painted him in an unfavorable predatory light were left on the cutting room floor. He could have insisted that the narrative remain focused on a simple business disagreement rather than a legal entrapment. The third and most compelling reason is that the network TLC had a vested interest in protecting the show's core premise, a family, albeit a fractured one, working through their problems. If it became public knowledge that Matt had legally checkmated Amy during the divorce, he would have instantly become the villain of the story. The sympathetic, family-friendly narrative that had made the show a hit for over a decade would be shattered. It would no longer be a show about a family farm. It would be a show about a ruthless business takeover. By keeping the camera's focus on the emotional turmoil and away from the fine print, the network could protect its stars and its brand. They could maintain the ambiguity, allowing viewers to choose sides based on emotion, not on hard contractual evidence. The very absence of this evidence in a show that films everything becomes, in a strange way, evidence in itself. The dog that didn't bark in the night, the camera that didn't zoom in. What we are left with is a narrative framework that has been built on whispers and reinterpretations of past events. But when you apply this framework, when you rewatch the seasons covering the divorce and the farm sale through the lens of the secret contract theory, the pieces fit together with an unnerving precision. Amy's prolonged anguish ceases to look like indecisiveness and starts to look like desperation. Matt's calm, business-like demeanor no longer seems patient. It seems confident, like a card player who knows he's holding a royal flush. The children's frustration, particularly Zach's, over the failed negotiations for his own piece of the farm, suddenly makes more sense. It wasn't just a squabble over money. It was potentially the realization that their father held all the legal power and that the family price they had always hoped for was a fantasy. The contract, if it exists as described, didn't just lock Amy out, it locked the next generation out too. It ensured that the only person who could decide the farm's future, the only person who could dictate the terms of its sale or succession, was Matt Roloff himself. This single alleged clause becomes the skeleton key that unlocks every puzzling and painful event that has transpired on that farm in the last 5 years. It explains the breakdown of relationships, the sale of the North Side to strangers, and the deep, abiding sense of injustice that seems to linger over the family. And this brings us to the most unsettling thought of all, a true cliffhanger for the Roloff legacy. If this theory is true, if this contract is real, then the battle for Roloff Farms was over before we ever even knew it had begun. And the drama we've been watching for years wasn't a negotiation. It was the slow, televised playing out of a predetermined contractual tragedy. This changes everything we thought we knew, and it casts a long, dark shadow over what is to come. The implications of the secret contract theory extend far beyond just the initial sale of Amy's portion of the farm. If we accept the premise, even for a moment, that such a legal instrument was in play, it acts as a Rosetta Stone, allowing us to translate the seemingly chaotic and emotional events of the past few years into a cold, logical, and strategic sequence. It forces us to reevaluate every major plot point, every family conflict and every business decision through a new, much darker filter. The most significant event that needs re-examination is the explosive falling out between Matt and his son, Zach. For years, the publicly stated succession plan for Roloff Farms was that it would, in some form, pass to the next generation. It was the dream Matt and Amy had sold to the public and, more importantly, to their own children. Zach, in particular, seemed destined to take over a portion of the land to raise his own family where he himself was raised. The on-screen narrative of their negotiation was portrayed as a classic, if emotionally charged, business deal gone wrong. Zach and Tori made an offer, Matt countered, and they couldn't agree on a price. Matt claimed he offered a family discount, while Zach publicly stated that the offer was near market value and that his father was choosing money over family. This led to a bitter and public estrangement that continues to this day. But let's apply the secret contract theory to this scenario. If the original divorce settlement gave Matt sole authority on valuation and sale, as the theory suggests, then his negotiation with Zach was never on a level playing field. Zach may have walked into that meeting thinking he was a son negotiating with his father for his birthright. But if the contract was in place, Matt was sitting there as the sole legally empowered proprietor of a corporation dealing with a potential buyer who had no special standing. The family discount Matt mentioned could have been a token gesture, knowing full well that the foundational price was set by the same rigid, business-oriented valuation method that was allegedly used to buy out Amy. He wasn't obligated to give Zach any special treatment. The alleged legacy lockout clause, designed to secure his control from Amy, would have had the secondary effect of disempowering his own children in any future negotiations. They couldn't appeal to their mother for support, as she had been legally removed from the equation. They couldn't force a sale or an alternative partition. They had to come to Matt, hat in hand, and accept whatever terms he and the contract he engineered dictated. This reframed Zach's outrage. It wasn't just about the price tag. It was likely the shocking realization that his father was treating him not as a son and heir, but as just another outside buyer. He may have felt that the family legacy was nothing more than a marketing slogan, and that when it came down to the black and white of a contract, he and his family were on the outside looking in. The betrayal he felt would have been profound. He wasn't just losing a house, he was losing the illusion of his place in the farm's future, a future he discovered was already legally spoken for by his father. The secret contract didn't just lock Amy out. It created a legal fortress around the farm, and Matt was the only one with the key. This theory also provides a chillingly logical explanation for why Matt would ultimately turn around and list the north side of the farm, the very portion Amy sold him, the very land Zach wanted to buy, on the open market to complete strangers. This move baffled and enraged fans. Why would he put the family through so much turmoil, refuse to sell to his own son, and then offer it up to the highest bidder? It seemed to make no sense from a family perspective, but from the perspective of a man enforcing a contract and executing a long-term business plan, it makes perfect sense. The secret contract theory suggests Matt's primary goal was always consolidation of power and maximization of value. The buyout of Amy, allegedly achieved at a controlled price, was step one. Step two was to extinguish any claims from the children by offering them the property at a price dictated by his own valuation, a price he likely knew they couldn't or wouldn't accept. When Zach and Jeremy inevitably walked away, Matt had legally and morally, in his own mind, fulfilled his obligation. He could then say, "I tried to keep it in the family, but they didn't want it at the fair price." This cleared the way for step three, taking the property to the open market to realize its full, unencumbered financial potential. By doing this, he could prove that the price he had quoted his sons was indeed fair, or even a discount compared to the public listing. It was a strategic move designed to justify his actions and silence his critics. The emotional fallout, the destruction of his relationship with his son, was simply collateral damage in the execution of a multi-year business strategy. The farm was never a family legacy in a sentimental sense. It was a business asset, and the secret contract was the legal tool that allowed him to treat it as such, overriding all emotional or familial obligations. He wasn't selling a home, he was liquidating a hostile partner's shares and then seeking new investors. The pain and confusion this caused the family and the fans stemmed from the fact that everyone else thought they were in a family drama, while Matt, allegedly, was operating from a corporate playbook. We must also consider the role of Caryn Chandler in this entire saga. Her introduction as Matt's girlfriend and now fiancé, a former farm employee, was a source of significant tension, particularly for Amy. The show portrayed Amy's discomfort as the natural result of seeing her ex-husband move on with someone she had known in a different context. But the secret contract theory adds another layer of potential resentment and fear. If Amy was aware, even subconsciously, that she was being legally outmaneuvered regarding the farm, she might have viewed Caryn not just as a new partner, but as a strategic ally for Matt. Caryn was there, day in and day out, on the farm, in Matt's ear. She was a witness to his plans, his frustrations with Amy's indecision, and his long-term vision. A whisper from a supposed former production assistant suggests that Caryn was more than just a passive observer. The report claims that Caryn, with her background in management on the farm, had a deep understanding of the business operations and was instrumental in helping Matt strategize the farm's future post-divorce. She wasn't just his romantic partner, she was his de facto business consultant. For Amy, who was physically and emotionally distancing herself from the farm, the idea of Caryn and Matt poring over plans and paperwork, perhaps the very paperwork that contained the legacy lockout clause, would have been salt in a gaping wound. It would have felt like a conspiracy, a two-on-one takeover of the world she had built. Amy's on-screen hostility towards Caryn might have been less about personal jealousy and more about a deep-seated feeling that Caryn was part of the strategic machine that was systematically dismantling her legacy and her connection to the farm. She wasn't just losing her husband to another woman. She felt she was losing her life's work to a corporate-style merger, and she was the company being acquired and dissolved. This leads us to re-examine Amy's own actions after leaving the farm. She sold her portion, took a significant payout, bought a new house with her new husband, Chris Merrick, and by all accounts has built a happy new life. The anti-theory argument is simple. If she was so wronged, why does she seem so content? Why did she take the money? This is a fundamental misunderstanding of the psychology of such a situation. Accepting the buyout, even a disadvantageous one, was not an act of contentment. It was an act of liberation. It was the only escape route she had from a legally and emotionally toxic situation. Living on the farm as a co-owner in name only, with her ex-husband and his new partner holding all the real power, would have been a daily torment. It would have been a constant reminder of what she had lost and the control she no longer had. Taking the money and leaving was not a victory. It was a tactical retreat. It was choosing her own mental health and future happiness over a losing battle for a piece of land that, in a legal sense, was already lost to her. Her happiness now doesn't negate the alleged injustice of the past. In fact, it reinforces the idea that her situation on the farm was so untenable that true happiness was only possible once she was completely removed from it. Her life with Chris is a testament to her resilience, not a refutation of the secret contract theory. She salvaged her future from the wreckage of her past. Furthermore, her continued, though strained, relationship with Matt for the sake of the show and their children can be seen as a pragmatic choice. What good would it do to publicly wage war over a contract signed years ago? It would only create more pain, more division, and potentially violate a non-disclosure agreement that was likely part of the very same divorce settlement. She may have chosen peace over a public battle she knew she couldn't win. She speaks her truth in coded language, in the pages of her book, and in the weary expressions the camera catches when the farm's future is discussed. She's moved on, but that doesn't mean the scars of that legal battle aren't still there. Let's delve deeper into the mechanics of how such a clause could have been implemented. Legal experts who have, without seeing the actual documents, speculated on the fan theories suggest that such a thing is entirely plausible. In complex, high-asset divorces, it's common to create detailed settlement agreements that try to preempt future conflicts. A clause that dictates the terms of a future buyout of a shared asset, like a business or a large piece of real estate, is not unusual. The devil, as always, is in the details. The alleged trap would not have been in the existence of the clause itself, but in its specific wording. Phrases like sole discretion in determining the appraisal method, final authority on sale price, and waiver of rights to seek outside offers could have been woven into the text. To a person in emotional distress, represented by a lawyer who may not have been as aggressive or as forward-thinking as Matt's team, these phrases might have seemed like standard legal boilerplate. Amy, focused on the immediate pain of the divorce and the division of her life, might have been encouraged to sign quickly, to just get it over with. She may not have been thinking about a hypothetical sale 5 or 10 years down the road. Matt, on the other hand, is a known long-term planner. He thinks in terms of projects, legacies, and 5-year plans. It is entirely within his character profile to have approached the divorce not just as the end of a marriage, but as the beginning of a new phase for his greatest project, Roloff Farms. He would have been thinking about succession, expansion, and control, ensuring he had the ultimate legal authority over the entire property would have been his top priority. The divorce settlement was the one-time opportunity to secure that authority. It was a moment of maximum leverage when emotions were high and his opponent, Amy, was at her most vulnerable. The secret contract theory doesn't necessarily paint Matt as an evil monster. It paints him as a ruthless strategist who, in a moment of great personal upheaval, prioritized his business legacy over his personal relationship with his ex-wife. He may have justified it to himself as protecting the farm, believing that only he had the vision to carry it forward, but in protecting the farm, he allegedly dispossessed its co-founder in a way that went far beyond a simple 50-50 split. He didn't just divide the asset, he seized control of its destiny. This theory also explains the almost palpable sense of sadness and resignation that hangs over the show now. The early seasons were filled with hope, with the chaotic energy of a family building a dream together. The later seasons feel like an epilogue to a tragedy. The children are scattered, the patriarch is isolated in his new house, and the farm itself feels less like a magical wonderland and more like a contentious piece of real estate. The dream of a multi-generational family compound has died, and it died, the theory suggests, on the day that contract was signed. The legal document that was meant to provide a clean break and a fair division of assets may have, in fact, been a ticking time bomb that ensured the family would never be whole again. It prioritized the land over the relationships, the business over the blood. So, where does this leave the future of Roloff Farms? This is the final, chilling cliffhanger. If the secret contract is real and it gives Matt ultimate and final control, that power doesn't just vanish. What happens when Matt is no longer able to run the farm? Does the contract specify what happens upon his death or incapacitation? Does his will supersede it? Or does the contract's language dictate the terms of inheritance? Does Caryn, as his fiancée and potential future wife, have any legal claim that could be tied to this foundational document? Could we see a scenario where the Roloff children are forced to negotiate with their stepmother for a piece of their own family's land, with her position strengthened by the very same legal framework that pushed their mother out? The secret contract, if true, doesn't just change our understanding of the past. It throws the entire future of the Roloff legacy into a terrifying state of uncertainty. It suggests that the fate of that iconic farm may have been sealed years ago in a quiet lawyer's office, written in the fine print of a document that chose one person's vision over a family's shared dream. If true, this changes everything about the farm's future. The fight might not be over. The most brutal contractual battle for the soul of Roloff Farms might be yet to come.